I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and today I'm speaking with Natalie Kingston, the cinematographer for the Apple TV Plus series Blackbird, as part of our TV cinematographers panel for Meet the Experts. First question I wanted to ask you is, what were some of the important factors that contributed to establishing the look of the series?
Dennis Lehane, our showrunner, wanted to really, the idea was to explore the depths of toxic masculinity, and basically through character studies and through this intimate, really creepy, awkward, tense relationship between these two prisoners, one being a serial killer. And he wanted to create this uncomfortably tense atmosphere. So I sort of just took that and ran with it, really. And sort of the crux for my visual inspiration was from the photographer Gordon Parks in this 1957 the photo essay that he did called The Atmosphere of Crime. And that, when upon my research and visual research for the show, I'd come across that book, and I'd actually come across it like maybe a year or so before the show, prepping for the show, and I recalled it during the research and looked at that essay again and that series of photos, and that was just a huge inspiration and the visual thesis, if you will, for the cinematography.
That was actually another question I was going to ask you about was, what were some of the inspirations you drew from in the visuals that you presented? And I was wondering if you could go more into that initial essay and photo spread that you referenced earlier.
Yeah, and that photos, it was, documentary series. It wasn't, editorial at all, so these were real prisoners in real prisons. And, what I took, it was just so powerfully striking. They, were very visceral, obviously, all natural light, but something very moody and cinematic about these photos, for lack of a better word, cinematic. But and that really spoke to me. There is just you could just feel the texture almost in these photos, and there was this pastel color palette that I really responded to, that I thought could be an interesting visual juxtaposition for the tone and the themes that we were exploring in Blackbird. The palette in this photo series was like pastel pinks and seafoam greens and light blues. And we did a similar thing with in our production design in our hero prison, which we spent a lot of time in the series in. And that comes back from years ago. I think it maybe started in the 90s or maybe sooner than that. Wardens believed that if they were to paint prisons, all male prisons, in pastel colors, it would have a calming effect on the prisoners. So I just thought that was just such an unexpected, interesting palette to run with. And so that really informed my choice to shoot on the Panavision H series lenses, which I feel already has this sort of pastel-y, muted, but still really rich palette to them. So it really enhanced that quality. And because, it was really, I was just trying to find that perfect balance between like subdued and moody and muted, but also still maintaining a richness to the image, like those photographs from Gordon Parks, where it just wasn't so washed out. And, it still felt, the black still felt velvety and lush.
How were you able to use the camera to communicate the confinement and the anxiety of that Jimmy feels while he's in prison?
We wanted to create a feeling of claustrophobia, because he is stuck in this cell and in this prison for so long, and also kind of stuck in this weird, awkward relationship with Larry Hall, a serial killer. And he has to just force himself and sort of fake his way into this on the surface sincere relationship with this guy to try to get this confession out of him. And so I wanted to create this feeling with the visual language and through lensing and through our format of not being able to escape and immersing the audience into Jimmy Keene's perspective and trying to just show them how it would feel to just be in this situation. And then also just to really just like plant the audience inside of those conversations whether they're in the cell blocks or in the cells themselves or in the wood shop. We were always everything was just so confined. So I chose to shoot on the mini LF and large format specifically just to embrace that wider field of view, because it can really help us in those small spaces, but also to be able to sort of create a landscape, if you will, with these characters' faces, so you really feel like you're front and center with these characters. So it felt large format felt like the right thing to do just intuitively. And then also keeping camera movement very subtle and very nuanced. I never wanted to distract with over the top camera movement. It was always needed to be motivated by the emotion of a scene or perspective of a certain character or an objective perspective. So the goal was when we did move the camera, it was to feel rather subconscious, if you will, and kind of unnoticed. And then when we did something, that was maybe a little more over the top, it was really, really motivated. And it was all very strategic when we decided to move the camera. But there is also a lot of static frames as well, where we're just sitting sort of uncomfortably on the edge of our seat with these very creepy, dark, uncomfortable conversations.
I was curious. Did you where did you shoot the prison scenes?
We shot, so there are 3 prisons total in the series, one being our main prison, which was supposed to be Springfield prison. And that was an actual prison in New Orleans. We shot the series in New Orleans. It hasn't been operational since Hurricane Katrina. So we had the run of the place, but, still a real prison. So all the restraints that come with that. The first sort of like holding jail that you see Jimmy Keene in as the series opens was Orleans Parish Prison in New Orleans. So that was also not operational. It was next door to our hero prison. And then when he gets out of there and goes to the next jail, that was actually an old school that wasn't operational that we transformed to a prison. We didn't have to shoot. There weren't many scenes that took place in there other than his cell, which was like an old classroom that we converted into his cell. Our department brought in a wall and we made a window. And then we utilized the existing hallways that were in there already.
So what were, you alluded to this earlier, but what were some of the confinement and constraints that you experienced trying to shoot, specifically the Springfield prison, trying to shoot in that environment?
Yeah, just things like, accessibility to like the lighting, the fluorescent lighting fixtures in there. Every single fixture is bolted shut because it's a prison. So all the bulbs were changed out before we started shooting, so they were all consistent, but I didn't have individual control over them. So we made workarounds, like the grips, like cut out different materials, whether it was black or diffusion or indie gels, and we stuck them on each individual unit with a magnet, stuff like that. And then just shooting like in a real cell. It's small, and getting the camera in there. Our department did cut us out a camera portal think it would, I mean, it's still relatively small, maybe like 4x6, just to be able to utilize another angle. But that was still, it still took a lot of time, you know, it wasn't a quick thing. So we really had to plan around the time it took to open up the portal, get the camera in, which we did with a small, like a GF8 small gym arm, and then put it back so we wouldn't see it on the other shots. So it's not like it would just pop in and out, you know. And let's see what else. And then, you know, just I think not having control of those, like easily control, like as it would have been on the stage, you know, just to have everything just individually controllable, you know. And then, you know, each cell did have a real window, but the window was like, you know, maybe like the, you know, a few inches wide by 3 or 4 feet long. And we were also on the second story of the prison. So getting, you know, we had to get a techno crane up there, and I think the elevator wasn't really operational. So that was tricky. Yeah. And then spending that much time in a real prison kind of gets to you after a while.
Well, Natalie, thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to you joining our panel in just a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for having me.